Hey everyone, and welcome back to another video. It is time for another weekly roundup, and this week we've got some pretty damn interesting stuff to cover, with what is likely an early version of the pre-patch content being on the beta, plus resurrected raid mechanics and plenty of other things. Plus, I've rejigged my lights, so now I should just look really tired as opposed to having a massive black eye. And also, as of the time of recording, it is the 1st of June, it's the start of a new month, and that means a new monthly poster. Last month's was a great success, and I'm now getting everyone addresses together for shipping. We are super thrilled with how it went, and there is plenty in the works where that came from. The June edition is now live, and that will be good to go for the rest of the month, and I'm still waiting the prints to arrive, so you will see those next week, but here's the art. Okay, right, let's get down to business. So the burning of Teldrassil, yep, we've got a bit of an update to this that gives a glimpse at what we should be doing in the Battle for Azeroth pre-patch. There isn't much story to this, and I am keeping it spoiler-free past what we've already covered, but this is important for the pre-patch content rollout. So, where we last left things off, Night Elves had just seen a bulk of their army. They sent them down to Silithus. Then the Horde attempted to exploit that with a surprise attack, and now the questing is basically just involving how all of this plays out. Now, quests appeared on the beta for the Alliance, so Alliance players are working with Malfurion to thwart the various Horde attacks and also rally the defenders, with us eventually buying enough time for the Night Elf ships to abort their journey to Silithus, turn around and come back home to Darkshore. And that pretty much is the end of the initial questline. We're then just told to keep up the pressure on the Horde until Anduin's forces arrive to assist. Now, once that happens, world quests begin to appear in Darkshore. Now, these world quests, they don't have rewards right now, but they do give you reputation with all Alliance factions, and they are scaled for level 110 characters. This pretty much tells us that this is a part of the pre-patch world, content. If I was to speculate on how things will go, then I'd imagine this is the launch content for the pre-patch. Then a week or two later, we'll get another set of quests, this time covering what happens when the main Alliance force actually lands. Now, the voice lines for all of that stuff, they've been data mined, but we don't know what will happen during the actual cinematic, and as for that cinematic, I think that will likely happen at the end of the second wave of Teldrassil questing, so that's when we'll really know what's up with the narrative. So from that point on, I'm not exactly sure what's going to happen with the world content, but I am almost entirely sure that the Battle for Lordaeron scenario will unlock shortly after. This means that once you start Battle for Azeroth, when it actually releases, you will have to do your faction's introductory scenario to the continent, but other than that, you should be good to go. And the good news is all these scenarios can be skipped on alts, which is brilliant. So overall, a little bit of me is kind of worried here. The Legion invasions were just so awesome back in the day, especially in how they just got the world crammed full of players. It just brought out the scale of an MMO, and the player base just put that into focus. It doesn't seem like BfA is going to have an equivalent to that. Now, perhaps Blizzard think that the events of Teldrassil and Undercity are going to be enough to get people talking, so the world quests will just kind of fill in the gap and carry the day. Now, one thing that I'll have to test at some point, I can't do it right now because all of the characters are level 110 by default on beta, but if you're able to use these world quests to power level characters, because of course one of the things about the Legion invasions that people loved is it allowed them to power level new characters in preparation for the Legion expansion. And then there is one other really important element that I think could make this really special if they do it right. So the pre-patch brings the BfA systems, and that should include war mode. Having Darkshore be littered with objectives for war mode players, that would be an amazing way of making this storyline actually be reflected in the game world. And it would just be so cool, turning Darkshore into a massive PvP area that's just stuffed full of players. That would lead to a pretty damn unique experience that I think would be awesome. Next up, we've got some crazy stuff going on with Uldir armor. So it seems like Blizzard have resurrected an old design for BfA. Now, at various times, WoW has had a steadily increasing nerf to raid content. In ICC, you literally just got stronger a bit more every week because of a zone-wide buff, or every month. Later on in Mists of Pandaria, you had item upgrades, which were pretty much a steady increase in overall player power every week, which is something that effectively nerfs content while also providing gameplay. Now, the modern game has Titan Fortune, where re-clearing with no progress will still give you item level upgrades, while Uldir has a mechanic called machine learning. Yeah, machine learning, the buzzword of startups freshly loaded with their Herman Miller chairs, that's now in the game. Fantastic. Anyway, so this is a new mechanic with Azerite gear. Now, Azerite gear traits, as well as being themed to your class, they can also be location themed. As an example, a Drustvar dungeon can have Azerite gear that has traits that are themed around the Drustvar zone. This extends to the raids, and the idea is that this will let Blizzard just be a bit more creative with raid-specific traits. So where machine learning comes in is that if you have active Uldir Azerite traits, you will get a health and damage buff. According to the tooltip, it starts at 1% and it can stack up to 30%. However, that's just data. We don't know exactly how this will work and how Blizzard will choose to use it. It could increase every week past the release of the raid, or it could operate differently. Right now, we just don't know. This is something that Blizzard also have not talked about. It's just something that has appeared in the data. And overall, look, I'm okay with this if the implementation is done right. The world first race, of course, it's likely safe from this. I very much doubt that it would start ticking up immediately. Now, if this does start up, really fast after the raid releases, maybe a few weeks in, then I think it could be a bit of an indication that Blizzard, they really do want to push people through raid content, which is kind of interesting. And there's the big question, does this pollute the value of maybe an ahead of the curve achievement if somebody gets it with a 20% content nerf? I don't actually have Curve because my current guild fell apart. I never really got around to finding another one, and I've been really busy with game development work, so I just haven't had the time to commit to raiding regularly. And actually, on the game development work, there's actually going to be a decent-sized announcement soon, and if you sleuth around online enough, you can probably work out what's going on. But that basically is the reason why I've not been able to raid this expansion. Anyhow, if Antorus did get a 20% nerf, in addition to me getting a bunch of gear naturally over time, you know what? I don't really feel like I would have earned Curve, which it wouldn't feel good for me either, even if I was to get it because of a nerf. So perhaps it's best that this is a mechanic that maybe kicks on a little bit later in a tier's life, or once the next one is opened up. Now, I'm not going to go too deep into this or be judgmental, really, because Blizzard haven't confirmed it yet. It's just an interesting discussion topic. Next, let's just talk about lore. So we've got a little bit of lore from a Magni comic and a letter from Anduin to Sylvanas that Blizzard posted this week. Now, the Magni comic doesn't really have much in the way of story revelations, but it focuses on Magni as a character and actually does it quite well, so I'd recommend checking it out. Then the letter from Anduin to Sylvanas, which is yet more of Before the Storm being previewed to us, it gives us a pretty good idea of where the factions are at. And it's set pretty much right now, where really not a great deal is happening between the factions overtly. So Anduin's response to the emergence of Azerite is to try to work together with the Horde and hopefully heal the Titan together in peace so that they can deal with the greater threats that are surely on the way. As a first step, he introduces the idea of reunification of families who've been torn apart, with some being Forsaken and other being regular humans. And, this does all seem lovely, but he says, do not mistake this as an offer for peace. It is only an offer of a single day's compassion for people who were cruelly torn apart by a force that was neither the Horde nor the Alliance. So as much as you can see the echoes of the Anduin that there is a harder edge to it, and it's been great to see his character develop over the last while, and I think BfA is really poised to make him one of the most interesting characters in the game, actually growing and changing over a long period of time, really making the length of the MMO kind of play into that. And that's good, because it's often something that MMOs really struggle with. And of course, it's a little bit unfortunate that it comes from external sources. And actually, at some point, I'm probably going to try to do a summary video of all the comics and Before the Storm and all of that external stuff, so that no matter what, you will be able to jump into Battle for Azeroth and really get the full weight of the character stuff. Okay, next, let's cover some of the class changes. I've got a bunch of requests to cover Fury, which has been tweaked again, and Balance, which I've now got a lot more gameplay in with the new version, and it's pretty great. So we're going to cover Balance first. Basically, Balance used to be really predictable. You would generate solar and lunar empowerments in a really predictable way, and then you would spend them in a predictable way, and there really was not that much to play around. They have pretty much solved this problem, and it's not perfect. It's not the most interesting thing in the game ever, but there's enough there to give this spec a lot more satisfying gameplay. So Lunar Strike has a 20% chance to give you a solar empowerment, and then Solar Wrath has a 20% chance to give you a lunar empowerment. Now, this is on top of Star Surge giving you a charge of each, as it normally does on life. What this means is that your resource generation is a bit less predictable, and that has the effect of making the spec feel a bit less boring, and it also varies your inputs. As an example, if you've got 2 charges of each empowerment, you'd want to do a solar, then a lunar, then a solar, then a lunar. Doing, say, 2 solars in a row would maybe risk over generating your lunar empowerments, though I suppose a more realistic scenario is if you've got 3 charges of lunar and 2 of solar, you would want to not use both solars at once because that would run the risk of overcapping your lunar empowerment. So there's, I don't want to call it nuance, that's too big of a word, but there's a little bit more in actually spending your resources here. Now, what's important is that all of this is made a lot more interesting by the new Starlord talent, which causes Star Surge and Starfall to increase your haste, stacking up to 3 times, but with additional stacks not resetting the duration, which means that it's a little bit like the debuff, or was it a buff? I think it was a debuff, yeah, from Mongoose Bite. So you don't want to just piecemeal throw out random Star Surges. You want to be more thoughtful, and essentially you want to get those 3 Star Surges to max out that buff. You want to use them as close together as is possible so you get as much time out of the 3-stack buff as you can, all while managing to not overcap your various empowerments, of which, of course, you know, the management of which is now a little bit more in-depth because of the 20% mechanic. So this, when combined with the moon ability being a talent, so when you've talented into that, it comes together to make a spec that is vastly improved over where it was just 3 weeks ago, where it was really predictable and really boring, and honestly, we were quite worried. So it definitely does, yeah, it feels great to be able to bring you news that, yep, Balanced Druid is actually getting a good little bit better, so that's definitely a nice thing. Next, let's talk about Fury. So Fury has had some more changes, with Furious Slash being removed baseline and being replaced with Whirlwind. Now, you can still talent into Furious Slash, and the talented version has both the chance to proc Enrage from the last build, but it also bakes in the previous talent, which would cause it to give you a haste buff that would stack up to 3 times. Now, Whirlwind is the default filler if you don't have that talent, and it generates roughly a similar amount of rage, but it also has the benefit of working in AoE scenarios, and it still has its effect where it will cause like your rampage to, you know, attack more targets. Now, this brings us actually back to the Wrath of the Lich King days, which is, I think, the last time where Whirlwind was a filler even in single target, and it certainly is a more satisfying button to press because, like, its animations and its sound effects, they're just great. So Blizzard have a few unimplemented versions of talents that are not on beta yet, so I haven't actually played with them, even though I have played with the above changes, so it still is a spec that's kind of in flux, but thankfully they seem like good changes. So Meat Cleaver is going to give Whirlwind a 10% chance to enrage you, which fills the same role as the old version of Furious Slash. Then Dragon's Roar, it's now a 40-second cooldown with a larger range that deals more damage and generates 10 rage, which means that you can use it during the new version of Recklessness, which doubles your rage generation over its duration. Plus, it also, in terms of pacing of the spec, is a little bit similar to Odin's Fury with its 40-second cooldown. Then Bladestorm now is a 1-minute cooldown, which I believe is 30 seconds less than previous, and it lasts half as long, so it only lasts for 3 seconds. For me, this is great because Bladestorm lasting for 3 seconds and generating 20 rage over those 3 seconds means that it perfectly fits inside an enrage window, whereas previously I felt like for 6 seconds you just hit the button and yeah, it was cool initially, but you know, then you're just sitting there, your character's doing its thing, and it's a little bit boring. Now, on the 100 tier, Reckless Abandon is unchanged. Anger Management has been added in for arms, so that's a cooldown reduction to Recklessness based on the amount of rage that you spend, so it's a 1-second cooldown reduction for every 25 rage, but remember that, as an example, Recklessness doubles your rage generation, and if you're talented into Carnage, you are spending 95 rage in one button with Rampage, so I really do think that'll be a fast-paced way of playing the game. Now, they do have another talent called Siegebreaker. It's a 30-second cooldown that generates 15 rage and increases the damage that you do to the target by 20% for 10 seconds. So it's a bit weird because it's basically a miniature Colossus Smash. So I guess, what, are you going to use Avatar, then Dragon Roar or something? A bit weird. They did say that they wanted to cut down the amount of CD stacking, so I assume that hypothetical talent build won't be the resultant gameplay of all this, but still, there's a damage window mechanic there if you want that. Doesn't make a lot of sense to me because that does feel like more of the arms niche, not really the Fury niche, and Fury already has mechanics like that with Dragon's Roar, so I'm not 100% sure why they've went in that direction, but overall, I do think that Fury is moving in a good direction. I liked its spammy gameplay previously. I mean, it was spammy, but it also did have a degree of control to it, and yeah, these new changes seem pretty positive to me, and then that's combined with the changes to arms, which I've already covered, and I really like them, and also some changes to prot that I really like, especially stuff like Shockwave being baseline, which I think is awesome. So overall, the Warrior development, for me, it's actually coming together quite nicely thus far in Battle for Azeroth, and yeah, I hope to see where they finally land with Fury in the future. So there you go. It's a decently light week this time around, but I think some pretty good discussion topics. Plus, it's always great to take a look at some of the classes. So if you want to check out those Patreon posters, there's the art, and you can check the link out down in the description. The May wave is going to be shipping out really soon, so that's what's going on there, and a massive thank you to everyone who supported that. We've really been excited about it. But yeah, other than that, thank you very much for watching this video, and I will see you next time.